My stepsister ran off with my fiancé and used to send me smug little postcards just to rub it in. Now? They're broke and practically on their knees, asking me for a job at the family business, the same one she was supposed to inherit. I'm 27 now, and this all started back when I was engaged to my college boyfriend. Dylan and I had been together all through college, and we got engaged when we were both 24. Things were good, or at least I thought they were. We'd been engaged for about a year when, just 1 week before our wedding, Dylan vanished. Poof. Disappeared. And not alone, he took off with my stepsister, Sullivan. Yeah, you read that right. My ex-fiancé Dylan, also 27, and Sullivan, same age, eloped right before our wedding day. I didn't get a phone call, not even a proper goodbye. Just a stupid letter from Dylan, saying he'd started an affair with Sullivan a few months after we got engaged. In that letter, he tried to paint it like some twisted love story, said marrying me would have been unfair to all three of us because he and Sullivan were the ones who were really in love. According to him, the universe had just used me as a stepping stone to get him to his soulmate. He said he couldn't go through with the wedding because it would have cheated all of us out of our real futures. And just like that, they vanished. I didn't see or hear from either of them again, not until recently. Greg's parents were absolutely mortified. They ended up covering every single cost of the wedding, which, thankfully, meant I didn't have to spend a dime. But after that, I pretty much cut ties with his whole family. There really wasn't anything left to say. Now, my family? They were beyond embarrassed. My mom was heartbroken, but my dad was absolutely furious. He even considered hiring a private investigator to track them down and drag them back just to make them answer for what they'd done. And by the way, when I say dad, I mean my stepdad, but he's been in my life since I was a little kid, and he's always been my dad in every way that counts. I've never met my biological father. He bailed shortly after I was born and gave up all his rights. My mom never saw him again, and honestly, I never missed him. My stepdad married my mom when I was 8. Sullivan and I had gone to the same school, and that's actually how our parents met. But for whatever reason, Sullivan decided early on that she didn't like me. From that point on, she made it her personal mission to make my life miserable. She was the textbook definition of a bully, and she didn't limit it to school. Nope, she brought that same energy home. Anytime she got the chance, she'd find new ways to put me down or make me feel like crap. I brought it up to my parents more than once, and while they did try to discipline her, nothing ever really worked. Sullivan wasn't scared of anyone, not even our parents. So, despite their efforts to rein her in, she just kept tormenting me. School became a nightmare thanks to her and her little posse of mean girls. And it wasn't like she had an easy life either. Her mom had passed away a few years after she was born. It was sudden, an epileptic seizure in the middle of the night. Maybe that's why Sullivan pushed back so hard. Anytime my mom tried to parent her, Sullivan would lash out, saying she wasn't her real mom and had no right to tell her what to do. My dad did what he could, but Sullivan just didn't care. They tried everything, firm talks, gentle approaches, even threats to send her away. But she called their bluff every time and made it clear she wasn't scared of consequences. And that was just her in middle school. By high school, things had gone from bad to worse. Sullivan had picked up all sorts of bad habits. That was the final straw for my parents. After weeks of drama and pushback, they finally got her into a rehab program for troubled teens. She wasn't thrilled, obviously, but my dad laid down the law. If she wanted to live under our roof and be part of this family, then she needed to change. He wasn't going to let her drag the rest of us down just because she couldn't keep it together. So she left during our sophomore year. She didn't come back until we'd already graduated. During that time, she stayed with an aunt and went to school near the rehab center. I didn't see her for those couple of years, and I didn't want to. Honestly, I was just glad to get a break from her. My parents still visited her on the weekends and would ask if I wanted to come along, but I always said no. After she left, her crew of bullies suddenly stopped paying attention to me, and for the first time in years, school actually felt bearable. Sullivan kept up with both her education and her rehab. When she finally came back, the first thing she did was apologize for everything she'd put me through. She seemed calmer, more grounded. And for a moment, I really believed she'd changed. So I accepted her apology and forgave her. It didn't seem like a big deal anyway. We were both getting ready to leave for college, and I figured we'd be off living our own lives soon enough. Once college started, we both moved out and only came back for holidays. And to be fair, after that, she really was nicer to me. Now, when I say Sullivan was nicer to me after she came back from rehab, I don't mean she turned into some sweet, thoughtful sister. Not even close. What I mean is, she stopped tormenting me and started pretending I didn't exist. And honestly, that was a massive improvement. I'd take being ignored over being bullied any day of the week. Our parents noticed the shift, but to their credit, they didn't try to push us to act like sisters or force some kind of fake relationship. Given everything we'd been through, they understood that basic civility was already a big win. Around that time, I started dating Dylan. After we'd been together for about a year, I brought him home for Thanksgiving to meet my parents. Everyone seemed to hit it off really well, and, surprisingly, Sullivan was actually engaged in the conversation for once. Ever since she'd returned from rehab, she mostly kept to herself, so her interest in our dinner table chat was unexpected. She and Dylan seemed to get along, which I didn't think much of at first. Then, weirdly enough, she started reaching out to me more often. She'd call or message me just to talk, something she had never done before. At the time, I couldn't quite figure it out, but a small part of me wondered if she had a thing for Dylan. Paranoia or gut instinct, I wasn't sure which it was, but one day I decided to just ask her straight up. I asked if she was only trying to be friends with me because of Dylan. She laughed it off and told me that wasn't the case at all. She said Dylan had talked about how close he was with his siblings during that first Thanksgiving dinner, how much they meant to him. Apparently, that conversation had stuck with her. It made her reevaluate how she'd treated me over the years, and she realized it was time to finally make amends. According to her, Dylan had inspired her, not because she was interested in him romantically, but because he made her think about family differently. She admitted that for a long time, she'd blamed me for being sent away, thought it was my fault. But she said she'd come to terms with the fact that she was the one responsible. Her behavior had been out of control, and she'd brought all that on herself. It was time to stop punishing me for something I didn't do and finally try to build a real relationship with her family, and that started with a genuine apology to me. I'm a bit of a softie, and hearing all that hit me in the feels. I wanted to believe her. So, like a total idiot, I forgave her. I let her in. I gave her a chance. I actually thought we were building something new, something better. And I think that's what made the betrayal sting the most. I had trusted her, and she used that trust to stab me in the back. For a while, things were good. We weren't best friends, but we were on speaking terms, and she was even helping out with the wedding planning. We'd meet up once or twice a month, grab coffee or lunch, and slowly rebuild the bond. By the time Dylan and I got engaged, things were going smoothly between us, and I had already introduced the two of them properly. Before the engagement, they'd only really seen each other at family gatherings, and nothing ever seemed off. They acted normal, just friendly, and I had no reason to question anything. Even after we got engaged, there were no red flags. Dylan acted like the perfect fiancé. He made me feel loved, supported, and secure. And Sullivan played her part, too, pretending to be the friend and sister she never really was. I didn't know the truth until it was too late. By the time I found out what they'd done, they were already gone. My parents were furious, ready to hunt them down and demand answers. But I begged them to let it go. I didn't want any more chaos. I was already heartbroken and emotionally wrecked. The thought of digging it all back up made me feel sick. I just wanted to crawl into bed and forget everything. In the weeks that followed, I basically shut down. I buried myself in work and sleep, trying to numb the pain and dodge my emotions. I was devastated, and yeah, completely numb. But the worst part hadn't even hit yet. A couple of weeks after what should have been my wedding day, I got a postcard from Sullivan. She was in California. That alone would have been weird enough, but she'd also plastered it with happy, smiling photos of her and Dylan. The whole thing was clearly designed to rub salt in the wound. She even wrote a fake little apology, something like, "Sorry for the last-minute surprise before your big day." As if she hadn't deliberately blindsided me. As if any of it was a surprise to her. The whole thing was just cruel, and it made one thing painfully clear: she had never forgiven me for the past. Deep down, she still blamed me for being sent away all those years ago. She never actually wanted to mend our relationship, she just used it as a way to get close to Dylan. Looking back, it was all so twisted. She played the long game. Manipulated me into thinking she cared, just so she could steal the one person she knew I loved. It was almost impressive, in a horrifying way. Diabolical, even. For days after I got that first postcard, I couldn't sleep. My mind was spinning, and I couldn't shut it off. I was losing it, heartbroken, betrayed, and stuck in this mental loop of how could they do this to me? It wrecked me. I ended up going to therapy for months just to process the trauma and rebuild my sense of trust. And if you can believe it, that postcard wasn't even a one-time thing. Nope, she kept sending them. More photos, more fake smiles, more little jabs disguised as she kept it up for nearly a year. I never once responded. Never gave her the satisfaction of knowing how much it was messing with me. I stayed silent, completely shut her out. My parents were furious. After the first postcard, they cut ties with her completely. Didn't call. Didn't write. Nothing. That was a big deal, especially since Sullivan had been lined up to take over her dad's business someday. But after what she pulled, they wanted nothing more to do with her. And that, as far as I'm concerned, was exactly what she deserved. Sullivan had majored in business, mostly because she had plans to work with our dad someday. That was always the idea, and for a while, it looked like she was on track to follow through. But after the stunt she pulled with Dylan, our father completely cut her off. And I can't blame him. He was devastated, and I think he felt like he had to make it up to me somehow, big time. So, one day, he sat me down and said, "You know what? You should be the one to take over the family business." At first, I was shocked. I mean, I didn't have any kind of background in business, I was a history major. My whole academic life was about studying the past, not running a company. But he didn't care about that. He said he'd teach me everything I needed to know, from the ground up, and that I'd eventually take the reins completely once he stepped down. It was his way of righting a wrong, I guess. And I took him up on it. So I started working under him, learning the ins and outs of the business one step at a time. It was a steep learning curve, but I put in the work. For a couple of years, I poured my heart into it, every day was a grind, but it was worth it. And last year, all that effort paid off. I officially got promoted, my dad retired, and just like that, I was running the whole operation. The feeling? Absolutely incredible. I started with zero experience, and now the business is thriving under my leadership. Things are steady, smooth, and successful, and my parents finally get to relax. They travel more, they have their weekends back, and they don't have to worry about the business anymore because I've got it covered. In all that time, between the business, therapy, and just trying to build a new life, I let go of the mess with Dylan and Sullivan. I stopped thinking about them. Stopped wondering what they were doing or if they ever felt bad about what they did. I moved on. So you can imagine my shock when they reached out to me, not just to talk, but to ask for help. Honestly, I didn't think they had the nerve. I mean, you've got to be completely shameless, or just plain stupid, to come crawling back to the person you betrayed and expect kindness in return. But sure enough, a few days ago, they did exactly that. It was a weekend, and I was home, lounging around and waiting for my pizza. The doorbell rang like someone was in a hurry, so I figured it was the delivery guy. I got up, opened the door, and froze. It wasn't the pizza guy. It was Sullivan. She was standing on my porch, looking frazzled and desperate. I didn't say a word. I just stared at her, waiting for her to speak. And right away, I knew why she was there. She looked like she'd hit rock bottom. Gone were the polished outfits she used to wear. Instead, she had on old, faded clothes, and her jeans were way too short, like she hadn't been able to afford new ones in years. She looked thin, pale, like life had chewed her up and spit her out. Even before she opened her mouth, I had already made up my mind. Whatever she was about to ask, the answer was no. And sure enough, she started with, "I need your help." She told me things had gone downhill fast. Dylan had lost his job a few months ago, and instead of job hunting, he'd taken to drinking. Meanwhile, she had been trying to find work, but nobody wanted to hire her because she'd been out of the workforce for years, playing the role of stay-at-home partner while Dylan worked. She said her resume had a huge gap, and employers weren't taking her seriously. Then she added, as if it would sweeten the deal, that she'd heard from some relatives that Dad had retired and left the business to me. And that's why she was standing there now, to ask if I'd consider hiring Dylan. She told me she hadn't even gone to our parents yet. She'd come straight to me because, in her words, "You have such a kind heart." She said she felt guilty for what she did, but she was hoping I could look past it and give them a chance to get back on their feet. The entitlement was just astounding. I couldn't help it, I actually laughed. Right in her face. And then I told her flat out, "I don't hire cheaters." With that, I shut the door and went back inside. I was ready to call the cops if she didn't leave my property soon. Luckily, she took the hint and left. But of course, that wasn't the end of it. First thing I did was call my parents and tell them what had just happened. Turns out, they'd already heard some neighborhood gossip about Sullivan being back in town, apparently without Dylan. They didn't think much of it at the time, but we live in a small town where everyone knows everyone, so it didn't take long to piece things together. Sullivan had been back for about a week before showing up at my house. She'd been staying with some old friend from high school, probably the same person who told her where I live and filled her in on the whole "me taking over the business" thing. And clearly, she was trying to milk that for all it was worth. A few days after she came to my door, she showed up at our parents' place, ready to spin the story and make me look like the villain. She told them I was being cruel, that I was heartless for turning her away when she was down and out. She thought she could guilt them into siding with her, now that she was the one suffering. But she had seriously misjudged the situation. My dad shut it down immediately. He told her the business was mine now, and I had every right to make whatever decisions I felt were best. No questions asked. My dad made it clear to Sullivan that he didn't get a say in how the business was run anymore, not because he didn't care, but because he trusted me and wasn't about to micromanage. He'd passed the torch, and that was that. And my mom? She didn't sugarcoat anything either. She reminded Sullivan, point blank, that she was the one who had betrayed me. She'd pretended to be my friend for years, only to run off with my fiancé like it was nothing. And now here she was, showing up broke and desperate, expecting grace from the very people she stabbed in the back. My mom told her straight, she didn't deserve our help. Especially not mine. And certainly not after those smug little postcards she used to send, just to rub it all in. Sullivan tried to spin the whole thing like it was ancient history. She said she was different now, that she'd changed. But my parents weren't buying it. They told her to leave. They didn't want anything to do with her anymore. That's when she totally lost it. She threw this tantrum in their living room, yelling about how they'd always treated me like the golden child, how I could do no wrong in their eyes. She told my dad that, even though she was his biological daughter, he'd always treated me like I was the only one who mattered. Said she felt like she was nothing to him. My dad didn't get angry, he just told her the truth. He reminded her how many chances he'd given her over the years. How many times he'd looked the other way, made excuses, tried to help her straighten out. More than most parents ever would. And she had thrown every one of those chances away. But none of it mattered to her. She said I had everything she was supposed to have, including the business, and accused me of flaunting it. She claimed it wasn't her fault Dylan had fallen for her and chosen her over me. And somehow, she still saw herself as the victim. She even tried to say those postcards she sent me were meant to be some kind of apology. That she hadn't been trying to torment me. And I'll admit, that last part stuck with me. I haven't been able to stop thinking about it since my dad told me what she said. Because, in a strange way, she's not wrong, she was supposed to inherit the business. That had always been the plan. But she lost that future because of her own choices. I didn't steal it from her. I didn't ask for any of this. I never once told my father to cut her out or pass things down to me. That was his decision, and I just happened to be the one willing to step up and do the work. Still, it kind of sucks to be blamed for something I didn't orchestrate. And that golden child stuff? It's not true, not in the way she makes it sound. But I get why she thinks that way. From her perspective, she probably still believes she was sent away just because I complained about her bullying. And yeah, that was a huge decision for our parents. I know it wasn't easy for my dad to send her away. But at the same time, what else could they have done? She was on a dangerous path, and if they hadn't stepped in when they did, who knows how far she would have gone. As for the whole postcards were an apology bit. I just don't buy it. If that's how she apologizes, sending sunny vacation shots of herself with the guy who cheated on me, then she clearly still doesn't get it. I think she's just saying whatever she can now to make herself sound better. To rewrite history and make me the bad guy. Still, I can't help but feel something. Pity? Maybe. She married someone who turned out to be a deadbeat, and now she's stuck trying to save both of them. And she actually came to me for help. That couldn't have been easy for her. So yeah, part of me regrets how harsh I was that day. I don't know, I guess I'm just built that way. I feel bad even when I shouldn't. I've got everything now, the career, the stability, the peace. And she has nothing. I can't ignore that. I don't want to carry this grudge forever, but at the same time, I also don't want to help her. Sympathy is all I've got to give. I'm not opening my wallet, and I'm definitely not giving either of them a job. Honestly, I think just feeling bad for her is more than most people would offer. Especially after what she put me through. And maybe that guilt I'm feeling, maybe it's rooted in what she said about me being the golden child, or maybe it's just plain OL imposter syndrome creeping in. But either way, I hate this weird gray space I'm stuck in. So, am I the jerk for refusing to help my ex-fiancé and the stepsister who betrayed me now that they're broke and out of options? That wasn't exactly the clarity I was hoping for. So I did what I always do when I'm torn up inside, I went to my parents. Whenever I've felt stuck in life, they've always been the first people I turn to, and this time was no different. They told me I had absolutely no reason to feel guilty. In fact, they reminded me that we all went above and beyond to help Sullivan, again and again. But if someone doesn't want to change, doesn't want to grow, then there's only so much you can do. My dad said he fully intended to let her take over the business, if she had even remotely acted like a decent daughter. But instead, she made a mess of everything and humiliated the family in the process. So no, she couldn't expect to be welcomed back with open arms after all that. And hearing that helped. Talking to them always does. It reminded me that I can't carry guilt for things I didn't do. I'm not responsible for her downfall, she is. It's been about a week since Sullivan showed up at my house. After her visit with my parents, things went quiet. I honestly thought she might have gone back to California, maybe crawled back to Dylan, maybe not. Either way, I was starting to relax, thinking the whole ordeal was behind me. But then today happened. She showed up at my workplace. And not just casually, she stormed right in. Since she grew up around the business, she knew her way around and managed to slip past security without raising any red flags. Just walked in like she owned the place. It was a total scene. Absolutely horrible. So after barging into my workplace like it was hers, Sullivan marched right up to the area outside my office and started shouting like a woman possessed. Loud enough for half the building to hear, she accused me of stealing the business right out from under her, like I'd plotted it all by being the obedient, butter-wouldn't-melt good girl in front of our parents just to win their favor. She called me a bootlicker, said I manipulated our parents into thinking she was the bad seed, and claimed I made up all the bullying stories from our childhood just to make myself look like the victim. According to her, I even convinced our dad to send her away to rehab, all as part of some master plan to take her place as the golden child. Then she said the real reason I wouldn't let her near the business now was because I was still bitter that Dylan had chosen her over me. She claimed I turned our parents against her because I couldn't handle being the one left behind, that I wasn't used to being overlooked. It was a full-blown meltdown, right there in the hallway. As soon as I heard the shouting, I called security. But I also decided to step out and see it for myself, part disbelief, part morbid curiosity, I guess. I told her to cut it out and leave, but she just kept going. Kept yelling for everyone to hear, like she thought it would win her some kind of sympathy. Eventually, security stepped in and dragged her out. But I wasn't sure that was enough, so I called my dad. I told him what had happened and asked if I should report her to the police. He didn't even hesitate, he was furious. He told me to absolutely go ahead and call the cops. Thankfully, she hadn't gone far. She was still lurking around the building, probably waiting for me to leave so she could confront me again, or worse. I don't even want to think about what she might have done if I'd walked out there alone. The police showed up, talked to her, and arrested her on the spot. They charged her with trespassing and disturbing the peace, nothing major, but it'll still go on her record. Most likely, she'll get hit with a fine or maybe some community service if the judge decides to make a point. Either way, it's not a great look. I told my dad about the arrest, expecting him to be a little shaken or upset, but he just sounded tired. Not angry. Not sad. Just done. He said he was exhausted from trying to deal with her chaos, always being blamed for everything that goes wrong in her life, even when it's clearly on her. Honestly? I get it. We've all been more than patient with Sullivan. We've given her chance after chance. At some point, you just run out of energy. So, it looks like she's gone. We haven't heard a peep from Sullivan since the day she showed up at my office. At first, I kept waiting for her to lash out again, another dramatic scene, another surprise visit. But nothing. Then my dad mentioned that a few neighbors had seen her heading toward the airport a couple of days ago. And in our town, news like that gets around fast. So yeah, I'm assuming she went back to California. Probably back to Dylan. And honestly? That news was the biggest breath of relief I've had in weeks. I was genuinely afraid she was going to do something crazy just to get our attention again. You never know with her, she thrives on chaos, and she knows exactly how to twist the knife. So the idea that she might finally be gone, even if just temporarily, feels like a gift. I have no idea what she plans to do now, especially with Dylan still out of work and her own job prospects not looking too hot. But I really do hope, for my sake, that she figures something out. And no, that's not me being generous or kind. I'm not saying this because I care. I'm saying it because if she doesn't figure things out, she'll end up right back here, knocking on our doors, dragging Dylan along, and making our lives miserable all over again. So yeah, I'm selfishly hoping that someone out there gives them a job, or that they stumble into a decent break somehow. Just enough to keep them afloat and out of our lives. At least for now. For the first time in a long time, things are quiet. I don't have to look over my shoulder or brace myself for another one of her explosions. And even if it's just a temporary break, I'll take it. This whole mess has been draining. And if she stays gone for even a couple more weeks, maybe, just maybe, I can finally stop feeling like I'm stuck living in the aftermath of her drama.